Well, friends, the show that doesn't exist and has no semblance of existence, Star Trek United, just keeps giving us elements over these past few weeks. So, of course, Screen Rant's covering it. I'm going to cover it because why the heck not? Apparently, that's the thing to do on YouTube if you want to get roughly 10,000 views. Also, for the people complaining that my audio was bad on the last couple of videos, I overhauled everything, so if you detect any difference and you did stick around, kindly let me know, or not so kindly as some people like to be. This by John Oriquiola, and Scott Bakula's President Jonathan Archer could get a new starship if his new series set decades after Star Trek Enterprise happens. Star Trek fans are very excited about Bakula and Enterprise writer and producer Mike Sussman's idea for Star Trek United, a political series about President Archer and his family. Now, I did cover a bit in that in a couple prior videos, so we're really only here to cover the new information, which, as it mentions here, is Andrew Probert, the designer and illustrator who has done a lot of work in Star Trek in the past, has been brought on board to, I guess, come up with concepts for a ship that would be used in this. Now, again, this show is not greenlit. The show has not been picked up by Paramount for all intents and purposes, as far as we know, which means any of this stuff could change if it ever actually does get off the ground and become a thing. As of right now, all we have is a dream and an idea by Mike Sussman with the blessing of Scott Bakula saying, heck yeah, I'll come back and do it. And now we're bringing in some other people, and they're probably putting out all this information to try and generate fan support. At least that's what it seems to be implying with all of these things coming out. A lot more so than any of the other proposed Star Trek shows outside of Legacy, and that kind of had a year's worth of people pushing for it, and because they didn't greenlight it fast enough or quickly enough, possibly intentionally so, it seems like it's more and more unlikely to happen. Scott Bakula's President Archer's new starship in Star Trek United explained. Mike Sussman and Andrew Probert agreed that President Jonathan Archer would need his own version of Air Force One in Star Trek United. Check out Andrew Probert's designs for Starfleet One or Federation One. So I'm going to go ahead and assume, let's see, he's the president of the Federation, and Starfleet is the military arm of the Federation, at least part of it. But in our own world, Air Force One is not called United States One. It's Air Force One, which is a branch of the military, and the helicopter is Marine One. So Starfleet One would probably actually be the more appropriate name. Does that matter whatsoever? Not in the least. Including some unused design elements for Star Trek The Next Generation that could be applied to President Archer's new ship. That's interesting. I'll try to make this bigger on the screen for you when I go and edit it. Apparently these are some designs that were from Star Trek The Next Generation full stop. I'm not entirely certain what these were for, if this was initial designs for The Next Generation or things designed in the midst of the show, because once we come over and actually start looking at the design of the ship here, very, very reminiscent to me, well, of a couple of things. So we have here some nacelles that look similar, but not entirely identical to the ones from the NX-01 in Enterprise. But if you look here, it's a lot more like, well, I suppose you could say the Dauntless class. But if you come here, it's also probably a lot more like the Captain's Yacht, which we were supposed to have in all of our ships, maybe not in the original series, but in Enterprise D, Enterprise E, there were Captain's Yachts. I think we actually saw the Captain's Yacht in, what was it, Insurrection? Nemesis? Maybe it was, I don't know, one of those, we got to see the Captain's Yacht. It was probably Insurrection, because that's where they did the weird singing thing. And even Voyager had the Arrow shuttle on the underneath of the ship that we never actually got to see in the show. So I think that's what they're combining here. And if you come to this image here, that's just kind of the outlines. But here it actually looks like it has some of the livery. Is that the correct phrasing for that? That looks more reminiscent of what we'd see on a modern day plane. So I guess it's kind of marrying all of these elements. Again, this show doesn't exist. So all of these designs and drawings are just wishful thinking and ideas right now. If they do greenlight this thing, this could be completely out of the realm of not even being in the show. Let's see, any more information? President Archer's official starship would, of course, need to have classic starship design elements like twin nacelles, but it must also look like an official ship that represents the UFOP. Starfleet 1 evokes a vessel fit for transporting a Federation official rather than a starship built for exploration or combat. Speaking to Trek Movie, Andrew Probert explained his designs for Starfleet 1 needed a logical, technological, and visual bridge from Dr. Zephram Cochrane. Don't hear him referred to as Doctor that often, but Dr. Zephram Cochrane's James Cromwell Phoenix warp ship seen in Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Enterprise's NX-01 Enterprise, and the Constitution-class USS Enterprise in Star Trek the original series. Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of words crammed in here, and if you don't understand Star Trek, none of that means anything to you whatsoever. Star Trek United isn't a real show yet, but everyone is excited for it. Ooh, Prime is getting a free 30-day trial, so, I don't know, check that out. Star Trek United has proven to be such an intriguing idea that Andrew Probert reached out to Mike Sussman. Okay, so Andrew Probert got on board and said, I want to draw something up for you, after hearing about it on social media, as news about Star Trek United spread throughout the fandom in the months since Trek Movie broke the news in STLV Trek to Vegas. Sussman was quick to point out to Probert that Star Trek United is not a real TV show. So it's good these people are actually keeping their expectations in check right now and not getting ahead of themselves, which might actually be the right way to play this. All the people that were desperately pushing for Legacy, as I mentioned earlier, to come out and be a thing, didn't amount to much. Now, obviously, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with strikes, the pandemic, creative choices, the merger, everything that's going on with all of the stuff behind the scenes might have made it impossible for Legacy to actually come out at that time. So playing this a little bit like, maybe we could do it, who knows? And we're only really right now trying to get Bakula on board as far as returning people. Now, ideally, we want a lot more people. Mike Sussman and Andrew Probert collaborated on the design for President Archer Starfleet 1 for the past month. All right, so they put a lot of work into this thing. Sussman also emphasized that Archer's new starship concept still very, very preliminary, but it's just exciting. Well, we have a little backstory, I suppose. That's Discovery stuff, the show that killed Star Trek. I don't really agree with that. I think it was more UPN killed Star Trek, and I don't even want to say Star Trek fatigue, even though it was becoming a really great show, led to it probably being, I don't even want to say ahead of its time, but it was partially ahead of its time and partially trying to ride a wave that people were already a little sick of. But it wasn't the show's fault as far as being a terrible show, at least so far as a lot of the reappraisal goes these days. I liked it at the time, but I was probably at the right age to really get into it. What happened to Captain Archer and his NX-01 after Enterprise ended? I'm curious to see what they had to say here because of the events that took place in the finale of Enterprise, possibly being overwritten because they never happened as they took place in the holodeck. In Star Trek United, President Jonathan Archer would be decades removed from his career as the first captain of the Enterprise. Star Trek Enterprise's canon established that Archer commanded the NX-01 Enterprise for 10 years, from 2151 to 2161. Captain Archer's post-Enterprise career saw him promoted to Admiral and then became a diplomat. Archer, whose pioneering voyages leading the NX-01 Enterprise formed the necessary alliance that became the formation of the Federation, is a vital figure in its early years, and he is elected as the first Federation president. Now, I'm not entirely certain because I did not read a lot of the early days novels, the Enterprise era stuff, but from what I've heard, he was actually the 5th president in some of the beta canon, so that's an interesting change from what we've seen in some of the other stuff. Now, it's beta canon. Most of that stuff never actually took place within the show itself in alpha canon, but it's just interesting that they're making that decision here. Meanwhile, Captain Archer's NX-01 Enterprise was refitted with a star drive section added beneath its saucer that brought the starship visually closer to its successor, the Constitution-class USS Enterprise in Star Trek TOS. Following its refit, it was recommissioned by Starfleet as the USS Enterprise. That's very interesting because, like I said, the ending of Enterprise, the show, Season 4, the holodeck episode, These Are the Voyages, showed it being retired without the refit, therefore, Trip didn't die. Star Trek Strange New World Season 3 Episode 7, Those Old Scientists established that the former NX-01 was decommissioned in the 23rd century and docked at the Fleet Museum. Are they going to mention we actually got to see it? Yes. Picard Season 3, Episode 5, The Bounty, showed Captain Archer's Enterprise was still intact in the early 25th century, and it was displayed at the Fleet Museum on Athen Prime. Sussman didn't intend Star Trek United to be a sequel to Enterprise, and his prospective Bakula-led series wouldn't involve reuniting Archer with his crew of the NX-01. Not all of them, but there needs to be some connective tissue. You can't just take Scott Bakula, use him as a prop, and then just completely override everything. It needs to feel like it's a connective piece in the Star Trek universe. Maybe you don't bring back the entire crew. There needs to be logical reasons for them to be there. But as the president of the Federation, you would think he would want some people he trusts and has made relationships with surrounding him. You would think he would want somebody on an advisory capacity like T'Pol. Like, I don't know, I would say Trip, but depending on what they want to do with Trip and his life or death, canonical stuff, whatever. Obviously, I think Shran is a definite. Whether or not he's on his cabinet, he's some sort of person involved in the day-to-day operations, or he's doing his own thing out there and still kind of butting heads with Archer now that Archer's in charge. I don't know, but these are the relationships that actually have pre-existing stuff built into them, so it would be nice to see something continued. That's pretty much it. So I waffled a lot longer than I intended to. This is basically just a way to show us that they're still going forward with ideas. They've come up with the children of Archer being a prominent feature of the show, and now they're coming up with an actual ship, I suppose, or a conceivable design for a ship. Again, I ask you, are you interested in this show in the least? Do you think it's a good idea? I am interested in this show conceptually speaking. Now, I've stressed over and over again, not a fan of prequels, especially the tendency over the past decade to just shove every Star Trek series into the same decade around the original series. Enough. I think personally, the best idea is to have a flagship show going forward from the last point in time we've seen before the time skip to Discovery, which would probably be a post-Picard show. Whether or not that be Legacy, I don't know if that's feasible right now, but something to continue the main exploratory version of Star Trek into the future, into the unknown. The other time period I'm okay with them exploring is this Enterprise era, because it was kind of left on such a not an ending, I guess you could say. There's still a lot to mine there. And you could also do something in the Lost era, but just by the transitive property of how history has worked out, there is a lot less of the unknown there. It's just more filling in the gaps. So I more so want to see the Enterprise stuff because I don't feel like it was given the conclusion we deserved. We never got the Romulan War. We never got the wrap up with the characters that I think they deserved. And this could be a way to just show us those early days while giving us a little more closure with at least some of the characters that us Enterprise fans grew to love. While at the same time, we need to move forward with the main shows, and maybe with this merger / hostile takeover, whatever they're doing over at Paramount Skydance / whatever the heck it becomes, maybe we'll get a couple of new shows announced and they can actually move forward with all this. Whatever you think, leave all that down below. Like, share, subscribe, join, hype, do all those YouTube things. But until next time, computer, freeze program.
Join weekly